Captain Zethkar of the Vorthak Supremacy stood before the massive viewing screen of his flagship, watching the strange vessel drift through the void. The ship was oddly designed with smooth curves instead of the angular efficiency his people preferred. Most peculiar of all, it transmitted no identification signals and responded to no hails. "Run a deep scan," Zethkar commanded, his forearms gesturing toward the sensor officer. "I want to know everything about that vessel and its occupants." The bridge crew worked with mechanical precision. The Vorthak had conquered 17 star systems through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. Their scanning arrays were the most advanced in known space, capable of penetrating any shielding and analyzing molecular structures from vast distances. "Scanning complete, Captain," reported the sensor officer, her voice carrying an odd tremor. "The results are unusual." Explained. The vessel contains approximately 300 life forms, carbon-based bipedal, averaging 1.7 meters in height. But Captain, their biology is unlike anything in our databases. Their cellular structure shows evidence of extreme adaptability. Their brain tissue has neural pathways we've never encountered. Zethkar leaned forward, intrigued. The Vorthak prided themselves on cataloging every known species in their expanding empire. A new species meant new opportunities for conquest or enslavement. Are they technologically advanced? Their ship appears primitive by our standards. But there are energy readings that don't match any known power source. Most concerning, Captain, are the historical data fragments we picked up from their computer systems. The sensor officer's mandibles clicked nervously as she transferred the data to the main screen. Images flashed past: massive explosions, cities in flames, creatures fighting with primitive weapons against overwhelming odds, and always winning. "These beings call themselves humans," she continued. "According to their own records, they have never encountered a conflict they could not eventually win. They have fought wars lasting centuries. They have survived extinction-level events. They have turned their own planet's most hostile environments into training grounds." Zethkar studied the images with growing excitement. Every conquered species had surrendered when faced with Vorthak might. These humans looked soft, weak, with no natural armor or weapons. Perfect slaves. What of their military capabilities? Primitive kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, basic energy shields. Nothing that could threaten our fleet. The officer paused. "However, Captain, there are concerning behavioral patterns in their historical data." More images appeared. Humans charging machine gun nests with nothing but blades. Humans fighting to the last breath when vastly outnumbered. Humans turning everyday objects into weapons. Humans refusing surrender even when facing certain death. "Fascinating," Zethkar mused. "A species with the warrior spirit but lacking the technology to pose a real threat. They will make excellent shock troops once properly conditioned." The communications officer suddenly straightened. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." "Audio only?" "No, sir, full visual. They're trying to communicate." The main screen shifted to show the bridge of the human ship. A single figure stood in the center, wearing what appeared to be a simple blue uniform. The human looked remarkably calm for someone whose ship was vastly outgunned. "Greetings," the human said in accented but understandable Galactic standard. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Endeavor. We come in peace and seek dialogue with your civilization." Zethkar activated his own transmitter. "I am Captain Zethkar of the Vorthak Supremacy. Your vessel will surrender immediately and prepare for boarding. Resistance will result in your destruction." The human captain's expression didn't change. No fear, no panic, just a slight tightening around the eyes. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Captain. My crew and I have a mission to complete. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our ships. You have no choice." "There's always a choice," Captain Chen replied quietly. "But I should warn you, Captain Zethkar, that scanning our ship without permission is considered an act of aggression by my people. You've just made a very serious mistake." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Threats from such a weak species? You amuse me, human." "Not a threat," Chen said, and for the first time she smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "A statement of fact. You scanned our ship. You learned about us. But you didn't learn the most important thing. And what might that be?" "That we never start fights," the human captain said, her voice carrying a chill that somehow penetrated the heated bridge air. "But we always finish them." The transmission ended abruptly. Zethkar stared at the blank screen for a moment, then burst into laughter. "Prepare the boarding parties. These humans will learn what true power means." But as his crew moved to obey, the sensor officer called out in alarm. "Captain, the human ship is moving." "They're not retreating, sir. They're coming toward us." On the tactical display, the small human vessel had indeed changed course. It was accelerating directly at the massive Vorthak flagship, like a moth flying into a flame. The size difference was absurd, like a child's toy challenging a mountain. "Let them come," Zethkar said confidently. "It will save us the trouble of chasing them down." None of the Vorthak noticed the way their own scan data was being transmitted back to human space. None of them realized that every piece of information they had gathered about the human ship was simultaneously being gathered about their own vessels, and none of them understood that the humans had been waiting for exactly this moment. The galaxy's most efficient military machine had just announced its presence to humanity's greatest warriors. The war that would reshape the stars was about to begin. Admiral Corax had built his reputation on swift, decisive victories. From his command center aboard the dreadnought Eternal Dominance, he had overseen the conquest of 4 different species in the past decade. When the report arrived about first contact with the humans, he felt only mild interest. "Show me the engagement," he ordered, settling into his command throne. The tactical hologram materialized, showing the human ship's impossible approach toward Zethkar's flagship. The scale was laughable. The human vessel was barely the size of a Vorthak shuttle, yet it moved with purpose directly into the teeth of the most powerful battle fleet in the sector. Zethkar opened fire at optimal range, his tactical officer reported. "Full spread, no warning shots." The humans had 0.7 seconds to respond before impact. Corax nodded approvingly. Overwhelming force was the Vorthak way. Better to eliminate a threat entirely than risk complications. Then something extraordinary appeared on the display. The human ship began to move, not the clumsy evasion attempts most species managed before destruction, but precise, calculated maneuvers that seemed to bend physics itself. The vessel twisted through 3-dimensional space in ways that should have liquefied any organic crew, avoiding massive energy blasts by mere meters while maintaining its forward momentum. "How are they surviving those acceleration forces?" Corax demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. Our computers calculate that such maneuvers would generate forces exceeding 40 standard gravities. No known biology can withstand such stress. But survive they did." The human ship danced through the weapons fire like water flowing around stones, each movement bringing it closer to the Vorthak flagship. Return fire began lancing out from the small vessel, striking with surgical precision. "Their weapons are primitive," the tactical officer continued, his voice growing uncertain. "Chemical explosives and kinetic rounds. Yet somehow they're penetrating our shields." Corax leaned forward, studying the engagement more carefully. The human projectiles weren't simply hitting random targets. They struck power conduits, sensor arrays, weapon emplacements. Every shot had purpose, every impact degraded Vorthak capabilities in precisely calculated ways. How could they know our ship design so well? "Sir, I believe they learned our specifications when Zethkar scanned their vessel. Somehow they turned our own sensors against us." The engagement lasted exactly 17 minutes. At the end, Zethkar's flagship hung dead in space, its crew unconscious from emergency atmospheric venting. The human ship had suffered minimal damage and was already moving toward the next vessel in the formation. "Get me a communication link with that human captain," Corax ordered. The screen flickered to life, revealing the same calm human woman who had spoken to Zethkar. Behind her, Corax could see crew members working at their stations with the efficiency of a well-trained military unit. No panic, no celebration over their impossible victory, just professional competence. "Admiral Corax," Captain Chen said without preamble, "I assume you're in command of this fleet." "How do you know my name?" "Your own communications revealed it when you coordinated the attack pattern. We've been monitoring your transmissions since you first appeared in this system." Her expression remained neutral. "I'm prepared to offer terms for your withdrawal." Corax felt his 4 hearts racing with indignation. "Terms? You have 1 ship? I command 18 vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts. You cannot possibly believe you can threaten this entire fleet." "I don't need to threaten your fleet, Admiral. I just need to understand how it operates." The human gestured to someone off-screen, and new information began appearing on Corax's tactical displays. Every ship in his fleet was outlined in red, with detailed specifications scrolling past. Engine capacities, weapon ranges, crew complements, supply requirements, communication frequencies. Information that should have been impossible for the humans to obtain. You see, Admiral, when you scan someone, you emit specific energy patterns. Those patterns reveal as much about your technology as they gather about ours. You've been broadcasting your tactical capabilities to us for the past hour. Korax felt his mandibles begin to click involuntarily. Impossible. Our scanning technology is the most advanced in the galaxy. In your galaxy, perhaps. But we've been developing our own approach to warfare for quite some time. Captain Chen's voice carried a quality that made Korax's species' primitive instincts scream warnings. Would you like to know what we learned about your people? Without waiting for an answer, she continued. You're an apex species from a world with limited competition. Your military doctrine focuses on overwhelming technological superiority. You've never faced an opponent who could adapt faster than you could escalate. Most importantly, you've never fought someone who considers survival itself to be a form of victory. What are you talking about? We studied your engagement patterns while you were studying our ship. Every species you've conquered followed the same pattern. They fought until the cost became too high, then surrendered to preserve their population. You've never encountered a species that considers surrender to be impossible. The tactical display shifted, showing movement vectors for every ship in the Vorthak fleet. Korax realized with growing horror that his vessels were being tracked and analyzed in real time. This is your final warning, Admiral. Withdraw your fleet from this system and return to your own territory. Agree to establish a neutral zone between our borders and this ends peacefully. And if I refuse? Captain Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. Then you'll discover why every human who's ever lived has been trained from childhood in one fundamental principle. Which is that there is no victory too costly if the alternative is defeat. Her image began to fade. You have 1 hour to decide. I suggest you choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving Korax staring at his tactical displays. His fleet still maintained overwhelming superiority in numbers and firepower. By every logical measure, the humans should surrender or be destroyed within minutes of renewed combat. Yet something in that human's voice suggested that logic might not be the governing factor in this conflict. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Korax found himself wondering if overwhelming force would be enough. The Vorthak High Command Chamber fell silent as Admiral Korax finished his report. Supreme Commander Vexthul, ruler of 17 conquered worlds, studied the tactical data with growing disbelief. Around the semicircular table, the galaxy's most experienced military leaders struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. You're telling me, Vexthul said slowly, that a single primitive vessel disabled our most advanced flagship in 17 minutes? Yes, Supreme Commander, and they accomplished this while suffering minimal damage to their own ship. General Mordek, veteran of the Kraxi extermination campaign, leaned forward. What are their actual capabilities? Strip away the impossible maneuvering. Ignore their apparent immunity to G-forces. What weapons do they possess? Korax activated the holographic display. Chemical-based explosive devices, kinetic projectiles accelerated by electromagnetic fields, and basic energy shields. By our technological standards, they are centuries behind our capabilities. Then how? They compensate for technological limitations through tactical adaptation. Korax interrupted. Every engagement follows the same pattern. They allow us to attack first, analyze our capabilities during the initial exchange, then exploit weaknesses we didn't know existed. Vexthul studied the recorded engagement again. The human ship moved like something alive, responding to threats with inhuman precision. Yet the vessel clearly showed signs of improvised modifications, jury-rigged systems, and what appeared to be field repairs. Are you suggesting they're adapting their technology in real time? More than that, Supreme Commander. They're adapting their entire approach. Watch this sequence. The display highlighted a 30-second period where the human ship executed a series of impossible turns. Our computers indicate this maneuver should have been fatal to the crew. Yet they performed it flawlessly. Enhanced biology? Negative. Medical scans confirm their baseline organic beings. No cybernetic implants, no genetic modifications. Standard carbon-based life forms with normal physiological limitations. The silence stretched longer. Finally, strategic analyst Kektar spoke from her position at the intelligence console. Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly. Instead of asking how they survived impossible maneuvers, we should ask why they attempted them in the first place. All attention focused on the analyst. She called up additional data, showing human behavior patterns extracted from their ship's computers. According to their own historical records, These humans have survived multiple extinction-level events on their homeworld. Asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, climate shifts that should have eliminated all complex life. Yet, not only did they survive, they flourished. The display showed images of human cities built in locations that defied logic, settlements in active volcanic zones, underwater installations, orbital habitats constructed around dangerous radiation sources. They don't avoid dangerous environments, Kektar continued. They adapt to them. More significantly, they appear to seek out increasingly challenging situations as training exercises. Training for what? Vexthal demanded. War, Supreme Commander. Their entire cultural development appears centered around preparing for conflict with unknown enemies. They've been training to fight us for thousands of years, even though they never knew we existed. General Mordek's mandibles clicked skeptically. One ship, regardless of crew training, cannot threaten our entire fleet. Actually, sir, it can. The voice belonged to Fleet Intelligence Officer Yexpol, who had been analyzing communication intercepts. We've been monitoring their transmissions. They're not operating alone. New data appeared on the main display. Deep space sensor readings showed multiple small signatures throughout the system, all moving in coordinated patterns. How many ships? Vexthal asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer would be unwelcome. Unknown, Supreme Commander. Their vessels use some form of stealth technology that makes precise counting impossible. Conservative estimates suggest between 50 and 200 ships in the immediate area. The chamber erupted in discussion. 200 human vessels, each potentially as dangerous as the one that had disabled Zethkar's flagship, represented a serious threat to the Vorthak fleet. But that's not the most concerning development, Yexipol continued, and the room fell silent again. We've intercepted long-range communications to human space. They're reporting our location, fleet composition, and tactical capabilities to their home territory. Vexthal felt his four hearts begin to race. How extensive are their forces? Unknown. However, their communications suggest they consider this encounter to be a minor border skirmish. References to the main fleet and home defense forces imply significantly larger military capabilities. The Supreme Commander stood and paced to the chamber's main viewing port. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see his assembled fleet. 18 massive warships representing the apex of Vorthak military power. Until today, this force had been sufficient to conquer any resistance they encountered. Recommendations? He asked without turning around. Withdraw immediately, Admiral Korak said without hesitation. We're facing an unknown enemy with superior tactical capabilities and unknown numerical strength. Every moment we remain gives them additional intelligence about our forces. Unacceptable, General Mordek countered. The Vorthak supremacy does not retreat from inferior species. Our reputation depends on decisive victory. Our survival may depend on tactical wisdom, Korax replied coldly. These humans have demonstrated capabilities we didn't know existed. Fighting them now would be premature. Vexthal turned back to face his officers. The decision would define the future of the Vorthak Empire. Retreat would preserve the fleet but damage their galactic reputation. Attack might result in victory, but could also lead to the destruction of their most powerful military force. Begin withdrawal preparations, he ordered finally, but maintain defensive positions. If these humans pursue, we'll demonstrate the full might of Vorthak military power. As the orders went out across the fleet, none of the Vorthak commanders realized their every communication was being monitored. The humans weren't just gathering intelligence about their technology and tactics. They were studying Vorthak psychology, decision-making patterns, and command structure. By the time the Vorthak fleet began its retreat, humanity had already learned everything they needed to plan their next move. The war was just beginning. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the UES Endeavour, watching the massive Vorthak fleet slowly withdraw from the system. Her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a woman who had aged years in the past few hours, though her expression remained calm. Captain, incoming priority transmission from Fleet Command, her communications officer announced. Put it through. Lieutenant Rodriguez. Admiral Marcus Webb's weathered face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Chen could see the bustling activity of the United Earth Fleet's primary command center. The sight was both comforting and ominous. Sarah, good work out there. Your tactical analysis is already being distributed to all fleet commanders. Thank you, sir, but I need to stress that we've only delayed the inevitable. The Vorthak fleet has enough firepower to glass a planet. They're not retreating permanently. Agreed. Which is why I'm authorizing Operation Prometheus. Webb's expression grew grave. How much do you know about the Deep Space Reconnaissance Program? Chen felt her blood chill. Every fleet officer knew rumors about the DSR program, but the details were classified far above her security level.
Only that it involves long-range intelligence gathering, sir. For the past 30 years, we've been sending small unmanned probes into unexplored regions of space.
Not to make contact, but to observe and learn. We've cataloged 17 different spacefaring civilizations, including the Vorthak supremacy. The implications hit Chen immediately. We've been watching them, studying them, learning their languages, their technology, their military doctrine. The engagement you just survived wasn't first contact, Captain. It was a field test of everything we've learned through 3 decades of covert observation. A new image appeared on the screen, showing a star chart of the local galactic region. Red markers indicated Vorthak territory, while blue showed the extent of human space. The scale was sobering. Human-controlled systems were vastly outnumbered. The Vorthak Empire controls 43 star systems and has enslaved 8 different species. Webb continued. Their total military force includes over 3,000 warships of various classes. By every conventional measure, they could eliminate humanity within months. Chen studied the tactical situation. Then why haven't they? Because they don't know where we are. Until today, they had no idea humanity existed. Your encounter just changed that permanently. The weight of responsibility settled on Chen's shoulders. By engaging the Vorthak, she had potentially doomed her entire species. Yet retreat hadn't been an option with civilian colonies in the path of the alien fleet. What are my orders, sir? Return to base immediately. But Captain, before you do, there's something else you need to understand about the Vorthak. Webb's expression grew darker. Show her the Milani files. A new series of images replaced the star charts. Chen watched in horror as the records showed the systematic destruction of an entire civilization. The Milani had been a peaceful species, focused on art and philosophy rather than military advancement. When they encountered the Vorthak, they had attempted diplomatic contact. The Vorthak response had been swift and absolute. Planetary bombardment, followed by the enslavement of survivors for forced labor. Within 6 months, Milani culture had been completely eradicated. This is their standard operating procedure, Webb explained. They've done this to 8 different species. Overwhelming force, total subjugation, cultural elimination, and now they know about us. Chen watched the final images of Milani cities burning and felt something cold settle in her chest. How long do we have? Intelligence estimates suggest 6 to 8 months before they can mount a full-scale invasion of human space, which means we have that long to prepare for a war we cannot win through conventional means. What kind of preparation are we talking about? Webb's smile was grim. The kind that requires us to become something we've never been before. Something the Vorthak can't prepare for because they've never encountered it. Sir, for 30 years we've been playing defense. Hiding, watching, learning. Now we're going to play offense, but not in the way they expect. Webb leaned forward. Tell me, Captain, what did you learn about Vorthak psychology during your engagement? Chen considered the question carefully. They're supremacists. They believe in their own superiority and expect other species to surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. They've never encountered sustained resistance. Exactly. They win through technological superiority and psychological intimidation. But what happens when those advantages are neutralized? I'm not sure I understand. The Vorthak have never fought an enemy that refuses to surrender. They've never faced an opponent that treats victory as something other than territorial control. Most importantly, they've never encountered a species that views warfare as an evolutionary pressure rather than a political tool. Chen began to understand. You're talking about asymmetric warfare. We're talking about becoming something the Vorthak can't comprehend. A species that doesn't fight to win territory or resources, but fights for the right to exist. An enemy that gets stronger under pressure rather than weaker. The star chart reappeared, but now it showed additional markers. Hundreds of tiny blue dots scattered throughout supposedly empty space. What am I looking at? Deep space installations, hidden manufacturing facilities, supply depots, research stations. For 3 decades, we've been building a distributed military infrastructure that doesn't depend on planetary bases. The Vorthak can destroy our worlds, but they can't eliminate our ability to fight back. Chen felt a chill of understanding. You've been preparing for this specific war. We've been preparing for extinction. And now that it's coming, we're going to show the Vorthak why evolution made humans the dominant predator on Earth. Webb's expression hardened. Get back to base, Captain. You're about to help us teach the galaxy's greatest military power why scanning a human ship was the biggest mistake they ever made. The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. Outside the observation port, the stars looked different now. Not empty space waiting to be explored, but a battlefield where humanity would either prove its right to exist or die in the attempt. Either way, the Vorthak were about to learn that choosing humanity as an enemy would reshape the galaxy forever. Supreme Commander Vexthul stood before the assembled War Council of the Vorthak Supremacy, his 4 arms spread in a gesture of absolute authority. The great hall of the Imperial Fortress echoed with the clicking of mandibles as hundreds of high-ranking officers awaited his words. Fellow warriors, he began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. We face a situation unprecedented in our glorious history. A species we had never encountered has demonstrated military capabilities that challenge our fundamental assumptions about warfare. The massive display behind him showed the engagement between Admiral Korax's fleet and the human vessel. Even after watching it dozens of times, the Vorthak officers still struggled to understand what they were seeing. General Mordek will present our intelligence assessment. The grizzled veteran stepped forward, his scarred carapace bearing witness to decades of successful campaigns. Honored commanders, we have analyzed every moment of contact with these humans. Our conclusions are disturbing. The display shifted to show comparative technology assessments. Their weapons are primitive, their ships appear hastily constructed, and their numbers are limited. Yet they achieved tactical victory against overwhelming odds through methods we do not understand. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The concept of losing to inferior technology was almost incomprehensible to the Vorthak mindset. How is this possible? Demanded Fleet Admiral Korath, commander of the 2nd Battle Group. We believe they compensate for technological limitations through superior adaptability, Mordek replied. However, this presents an opportunity as much as a threat. The display changed again, showing the location of human space relative to Vorthak territory. The size difference was stark. Human-controlled systems numbered in the dozens, while Vorthak space encompassed hundreds of worlds. Despite their tactical advantages, they remain vastly outnumbered. A coordinated assault with our full military force would overwhelm their ability to adapt. Vexthul nodded approvingly. Elaborate on your strategy. Phase 1 involves mobilizing our entire fleet, every available warship, from dreadnoughts to patrol vessels. We will mass 3,000 ships for simultaneous strikes against all known human positions. The assembly erupted in approving clicks and whistles. This was the Vorthak way. Overwhelming force applied without mercy or hesitation. Phase 2 targets their civilian infrastructure. Colonies, trade routes, manufacturing centers. We will force them to divide their limited forces to protect non-military assets. And Phase 3? Asked Admiral Korax. Complete extermination. Unlike previous conquests where we preserved useful populations for slavery, these humans are too dangerous to permit survival. We will sterilize every world they inhabit. The approval from the assembled officers was unanimous. The plan followed proven Vorthak doctrine while addressing the unique threat humans represented. But Intelligence Officer Yexapol stepped forward, her expression troubled. Supreme Commander, I must present additional data that may affect this strategy. Vexthul's mandibles clicked in irritation. Speak. Long-range reconnaissance has detected anomalous readings throughout the region between our territory and human space. Energy signatures that don't match any known technology. Explain. We believe the humans have established hidden installations throughout supposedly empty space. The number and nature of these facilities is unknown, but their existence suggests a level of preparation we hadn't anticipated. Mordek dismissed the concern with a wave of his primary arms. Hidden bases change nothing. They lack the industrial capacity to threaten our fleet regardless of how many secret installations they possess. Perhaps, General. But there's something else. Yexpol activated new displays showing communication intercepts. We've been monitoring human transmissions. They're not preparing to surrender or negotiate. They appear to be, excited about the prospect of total war. The chamber fell silent. Every conquered species had eventually sought terms when faced with complete destruction. The concept of a civilization welcoming extinction-level conflict was beyond Vorthak understanding. "You're certain of this assessment?" Vexthul demanded. Their communications contain frequent references to something they call the final test. They appear to view our threat not as a disaster to be avoided, but as an opportunity to prove something to themselves. Admiral Korax leaned forward. Could this be a psychological warfare tactic, attempting to make us believe they're more dangerous than they actually are? Negative. These are internal communications, not propaganda broadcasts. They genuinely appear to consider total war against overwhelming odds to be desirable. The implications were deeply unsettling. The Vorthak had built their empire on the assumption that all intelligent species valued survival above principle. An enemy that welcomed destruction challenged everything they understood about conquest. General Mordek stepped forward again. "Supreme Commander, this changes nothing. Regardless of their psychological state, they cannot survive the destruction of their infrastructure and civilian population. We proceed as planned." Vexthul considered the options. Retreat would preserve Vorthak forces but damage their reputation throughout the galaxy. Other subject species might interpret withdrawal as weakness and attempt rebellion. Attack carried risks, but maintained the fear that kept their empire stable. "We proceed with the original plan," he decided. "Begin fleet mobilization immediately. Every available ship, every trained crew. We will demonstrate to these humans and to the galaxy that the Vorthak supremacy does not retreat from any threat." As the assembly dispersed to implement the orders, none of the Vorthak officers noticed the subtle energy readings emanating from their own communication systems. The humans weren't just intercepting their transmissions. They were analyzing Vorthak decision-making patterns, command structures, and psychological profiles. Every word spoken in the Great Hall was being recorded and transmitted to human intelligence analysts who were building a comprehensive understanding of their enemy's weaknesses. The Vorthak believed they were planning the final destruction of humanity. In reality, they were providing the information that would make their own defeat inevitable. The galaxy's most powerful military force was about to discover that winning every previous war had left them completely unprepared for an enemy that had been studying failure for millennia. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the war room deep beneath Luna's surface, surrounded by holographic displays showing the greatest military mobilization in human history. 3 months had passed since first contact with the Vorthak, and every day brought humanity closer to a war that would determine the survival of their species. "Status report," he commanded. Colonel Sarah Martinez, formerly Captain Chen, stepped forward. Her promotion had come with new responsibilities that she wore like armor. "All deep space installations are operational. Manufacturing output has increased 400%. Fleet Command reports 2,000 vessels ready for deployment." Webb studied the tactical displays. The numbers were impressive by human standards, but paled in comparison to Vorthak capabilities. Intelligence suggested the enemy was mobilizing over 3,000 warships for their offensive. "What about the Prometheus protocol? Phase 1 is complete. Every major Vorthak installation has been infiltrated by our reconnaissance drones. We have real-time intelligence on fleet movements, supply lines, and command structures." Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, chief of xenopsychology, approached with a tablet full of behavioral analysis data. "Marcus, we need to discuss the psychological profile updates." Webb turned his attention to the scientist who had become humanity's expert on alien military doctrine. "What have you learned?" "The Vorthak aren't just confident about victory. They're absolutely certain of it. Their entire strategic planning assumes human surrender or destruction within 6 months. They've never prepared for extended conflict. How extended are we talking? Their supply lines are designed for short, decisive campaigns. If we can survive their initial assault and force them into prolonged warfare, their logistical systems will collapse within 18 months. Webb considered the implications. "Can we survive their initial assault?" Martinez answered grimly. "Not through conventional defense. They'll hit us with everything simultaneously. Every human world will be under attack within hours of their offensive beginning. Then we don't defend conventionally. Webb activated new tactical displays showing human space from an entirely different perspective. Instead of worlds to be protected, the map highlighted thousands of small installations scattered throughout seemingly empty space. Operation Lazarus is our real defense strategy, he explained. When the Vorthak attack our worlds, we let them win. Every major population center has evacuation protocols. When they arrive, they'll find empty cities and abandoned installations. The assembled officers studied the plan with growing understanding. Humanity wouldn't fight for territory because they weren't depending on territory for survival. Where does our population go? Asked General Thompson, commander of the Luna Defense Force. Deep space habitats, asteroid mining stations, mobile fleet bases. We've been building parallel infrastructure for 30 years. The Vorthak can destroy every human world and will still have the industrial capacity to continue fighting. Dr. Hawkins nodded approvingly. This plays directly into their psychological weaknesses. They're expecting us to defend our homeworlds desperately. When we abandon them willingly, it will create cognitive dissonance in their command structure. But there's more, Webb continued. Lieutenant Commander Kim, report on Phase 2 preparations. The young intelligence officer activated classified files that few people had clearance to see. Project Prometheus isn't just about intelligence gathering. We've been placing infiltration packages throughout Vorthak space for months. What kind of packages? Martinez asked. Manufacturing viruses that will corrupt their industrial systems. Communication parasites that will feed false information to their command networks. Supply depot sabotage devices that will activate once their offensive begins. Webb smiled grimly. While they're celebrating their conquest of empty human worlds, their own infrastructure will begin failing. Food shipments contaminated, ammunition depots exploding, communication networks feeding contradictory orders. How extensive is the infiltration? Thompson inquired. Every major Vorthak installation plus their primary supply routes and communication relays. We've essentially inserted a parallel command structure into their empire, one that will activate once they commit to attacking us. The war room fell silent as the officers contemplated the scope of the operation. Humanity hadn't just been preparing to defend against the Vorthak. They had been preparing to destroy them from within. There's one more element, Dr. Hawkins added quietly. Something we've learned about Vorthak psychology that they don't know about themselves. Explain. They've never lost a war. More specifically, they've never failed to achieve decisive victory through overwhelming force. Their entire cultural identity is built on the assumption of military superiority. And, when that assumption is proven wrong, when they're forced to fight an enemy they can't defeat through conventional means, their psychological response will be catastrophic. Not just for their military but for their entire civilization. Webb understood. You're saying we can break them psychologically? I'm saying that if we survive their initial assault and force them into extended conflict, they'll eventually destroy themselves. Their subject species will rebel, their officer corps will fracture, and their empire will collapse from internal pressure. Martinez leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. We're not just fighting for our survival. We're fighting to liberate every species the Vorthak have enslaved. Which brings us to the final phase of Operation Prometheus, Webb said, activating the last set of classified files. We've made contact with resistance movements in 8 different Vorthak-controlled systems. When their military collapses, we'll help coordinate simultaneous uprisings throughout their empire. The scope of the plan was breathtaking. Humanity hadn't just prepared to survive Vorthak aggression. They had engineered the complete destruction of the galaxy's most powerful empire through a combination of asymmetric warfare, psychological manipulation, and coordinated rebellion. When do we expect them to attack? Martinez asked. Webb checked the latest intelligence reports. Soon. Our deep space sensors show massive fleet movements throughout their territory. They're positioning for simultaneous strikes against all known human systems. Are we ready? Webb looked around the room at the officers who would determine humanity's fate. Each face showed the same expression, grim determination mixed with absolute resolve. Colonel Martinez, you asked if we're ready. The better question is whether the galaxy is ready for what humanity becomes when we're fighting for our survival. Outside the war room, The greatest military force in human history prepared for a conflict that would reshape the stars. The Vorthak believed they were about to destroy a primitive species. In reality, they were about to discover why evolution had made humans the galaxy's most dangerous predators. The Vorthak Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 3,000 vessels arranged in an overwhelming display of military might. Supreme Commander Vexthul watched from his flagship's bridge as the human colony world of New Geneva appeared on the main screen, defenseless and apparently unaware of its impending destruction. "Begin planetary bombardment," he ordered confidently. Standard extermination protocol. Energy beams lanced down from orbit targeting major population centers. Cities that should have erupted in flames and chaos instead revealed themselves to be empty shells. Massive structures crumbled, but no life signs vanished from the sensors because there had been no life signs to begin with. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with confusion, "the colony appears to be abandoned. All major installations are empty." Vexthul's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Scan for hidden populations. They must be hiding underground." Deep penetration scans revealed elaborate tunnel networks and hidden facilities, but all were empty. The humans had simply vanished, leaving behind only automated systems and empty buildings. Similar reports came in from attack fleets throughout human space. World after world proved to be abandoned. Millions of humans had simply disappeared without a trace, leaving behind empty colonies that offered no resistance and no satisfaction. "This is impossible," General Mordek announced over the communication network. "We're monitoring human communication networks. Their government still functions, their military still exists, but their civilian populations have vanished." Then the sabotage began. It started small. Supply ships arriving at forward bases with contaminated food that poisoned entire crews. Communication relays broadcasting conflicting orders that sent battle groups to empty systems, while leaving critical positions undefended. Ammunition depots exploding without warning, taking entire installation complexes with them. "Sir," the intelligence officer called out in alarm, "we're receiving reports of system failures throughout the fleet. 17 ships have suffered critical malfunctions in the past hour." Vexthul studied the tactical display with growing unease. His perfectly coordinated offensive was beginning to fragment as individual units reported equipment failures, navigation errors, and communication breakdowns. "How is this possible? Our technology is superior to theirs in every way." "Unknown, sir. The failures appear random, but they're affecting every aspect of our operations simultaneously." What the Vorthak didn't understand was that their superior technology had become their greatest weakness. Every advanced system incorporated standardized components that humanity had been studying for decades. The infiltration devices weren't adding new elements to Vorthak technology. They were corrupting existing systems from within. Then the humans revealed themselves, not as defenders of fixed positions, but as ghosts moving through space itself. Human vessels appeared without warning, struck with surgical precision at Vorthak supply lines, then vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Each attack was perfectly coordinated with equipment failures that left Vorthak ships vulnerable at exactly the right moment. Admiral Korax, Vexthul's communication officer, announced, "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." The main screen activated, showing Captain Martinez aboard her command vessel. Behind her, displays showed real-time tactical information about every Vorthak ship in the system, including classified specifications that should have been impossible for the humans to obtain. "Supreme Commander Vexthul," she said calmly, "I believe you're experiencing some technical difficulties. How are you doing this?" Vexthul demanded. "Our security systems are impenetrable. Actually, they're quite penetrable once you understand how they work. You see, Commander, when you scanned our ship months ago, you taught us everything we needed to know about Vorthak technology. We've been preparing ever since." The display behind Martinez shifted to show a galaxy-wide map. Red indicators throughout Vorthak space were winking out one by one, representing supply depots, communication networks, and industrial facilities all suffering simultaneous failures. "This is impossible. Our empire spans hundreds of worlds." "Your empire spans hundreds of worlds that all depend on the same standardized technology," Martinez corrected. "Technology we've been studying and learning to disrupt. Right now, every major installation in Vorthak space is experiencing critical system failures." Vexthul felt his four hearts racing as reports flooded in from across the empire. Rebellions on subject worlds, supply lines collapsing, fleet units losing communication with command structures. But there's something else you should know, Martinez continued, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction that chilled Vexthul to his core. You've been fighting the wrong war. What do you mean? You came here to destroy humanity. But we didn't come here to defend our territory. We came here to liberate your slaves. New signals appeared on the tactical display. Human ships were emerging throughout Vorthak space, but they weren't attacking military targets. They were providing support to rebellions on enslaved worlds, coordinating uprisings, and offering advanced weapons to resistance movements. Every species you've conquered has been waiting for this moment, Martinez explained. They were never truly defeated, just waiting for someone to show them that the Vorthak could be beaten. The reports coming in confirmed humanity's claims. The Milani, thought extinct, had preserved hidden populations that were now rising against their oppressors. The Kraxi were reclaiming their homeworld. 8 different species were simultaneously declaring independence and forming an alliance with human forces. Your fleet is cut off from resupply, Martinez continued relentlessly. Your communication networks are compromised. Your subject worlds are in rebellion, and your industrial capacity is being systematically destroyed by systems your own engineers built. Vexthul realized with growing horror that the humans had engineered not just military defeat, but the complete collapse of Vorthak civilization. Everything his people had built over centuries was crumbling in a matter of hours. What do you want? He asked finally. Unconditional surrender, complete withdrawal from all conquered territories, reparations to every enslaved species, and most importantly, acceptance that the age of Vorthak supremacy is over. The choice was simple: surrender or watch his entire civilization destroy itself. Vexthul looked around his bridge at officers who had never known defeat, seeing the same realization in their expressions. We surrender, he said quietly. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Outside the viewports, human ships moved with purpose through space that had been Vorthak-controlled hours earlier. The galaxy's greatest military power had been defeated not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding of warfare itself. The humans had taught them that true victory came not from destroying your enemy, but from making continued resistance impossible. In the aftermath, as historians would later document, the Vorthak-human war lasted exactly 14 hours from first shot to final surrender, but its consequences would reshape galactic civilization for millennia. The humans had proven that even the most overwhelming force could be defeated by an enemy that refused to fight by conventional rules. More importantly, they had demonstrated that the strongest empires were often the most vulnerable to collapse when their fundamental assumptions were challenged. The galaxy learned that day why humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through conquest but through an understanding that true strength came from lifting others up rather than holding them down. The Vorthak had scanned a human ship and learned its specifications, but they had failed to understand the most important thing about humanity itself, that when pushed to the edge of extinction, humans didn't just fight harder, they fought smarter, and that made all the difference.